You're listening to The Unlikely Executive, the podcast for the curious, those people who want to understand how they can lead better and perhaps have faced challenges or self-limiting beliefs. I am Barbra Carlisle, a leadership coach and an experienced facilitator working with people in the housing, construction and engineering sector. And each week I speak to leaders who've sometimes learned the hard way how to stay steady under pressure, how to build teams authentically, and how to grow a business without losing themselves in the process. Let's step in.
Hello and welcome to The Unlikely Executive. I'm really pleased to have as my guest this week Kathleen Abbott from Shawmut Design and Construction Business. I'm going to hear all about her career journey and how you survive as a woman in the construction sector. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thanks so much, Barbara. It's great to be here today. Shawmut is focused in North America, and our main hubs currently are our headquarters are in Boston. So Boston, New York, Miami, and LA are our main hubs. And then we have a number of project sites, client sites, project sites, as well as some smaller offices throughout the different geographies.
You work for Shawmut, and can you just tell the audience what it is you do there, please?
Yeah, happy to do so. So I am at Shawmut, which is, you mentioned, a construction company. And I actually just recently joined the organizations. We are a company of about 2.3 billion in a national construction management firm based in the US. And I joined really to support them. My role is chief growth officer, and I joined recently to really help shape the company's next phase of growth. So they've had some incredible growth over the last 10 years, doubling their revenue between 2021 and 2024. And really, as we embark on this next chapter, really helping to look at what are the places, thinking about smart strategic expansion across multiple sectors and markets to really drive and double our business again. So I'm looking across all of marketing and sales to support the business.
So what's the expectation on you now?
Exactly. Well, no pressure at all. They are, an employee-owned company, and they've grown very successfully over the years. And they said, concept of what got us here won't get us there. So what can we do differently? And they said, when we look around at and the companies that we aspire to be and the growth that we want to have, that was a missing, kind of foundational element, was having that person that was getting up every day thinking about where are we targeting, where are we focused on from a growth perspective.
Right, so massive.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Well, no pressure, but super exciting. And I think the other thing that's really awesome is you're coming into, an organization that is, again, because they're employee owned, super collaborative. Everybody is an owner and has a stake in the future of the organization. And so things are going really well, and we're going, okay, how do we take it to the next step? It's a nice environment, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And so was the fact that it was an employee-owned trust something that attracted you to the organization?
I think it really wasn't, something that I initially was thinking about or going out to, but I think it's the outcome of being an employee-owned organization, right? That culture that it drives throughout the teams of collaboration. That's really what spoke to me when I met with the CEO, when I met the other C-suite team members, and then started to meet more and more of the business. That culture that really just permeated through the organization. That's really what attracted me to the company. And I will say, very early on in my career, on the other side of that timeline, I actually was with an organization that was an employee-owned company that was acquired by the company that I worked with for many years. And so there's also an element, it feels like coming home. There's something very familiar about it. Yeah.
What do you need to do to become a chief growth officer? What was your sort of discipline in as you were starting off, and is it
Sure.
relevant to what you're doing now?
Yeah. For me, it's a very fun story, and I could talk about this all day long, right? And I think often people would look at my resume, they looked at my LinkedIn profile, and they go, "You're a geologist, right? That's your technical training. How did you get here? Like, why was the pathway that led you to construction?" And so happy to share that story a little bit. But I think the theme that drives or that, shows up throughout my career journey is really about curiosity and problem solving. So yes, my undergraduate and graduate degrees are in geology and earth and planetary sciences. I was a very curious person. So the sciences really spoke to me. And I will say specifically geology spoke to me because it was I would call it like the physical manifestation of math and chemistry and physics, where you really see it coming to life in
Mm.
books. So it's like there's the technical reason that I connected with geology, and the more fun reason was I had started out actually in engineering, and I did an engineering program for 2 years, and I thought, I don't know if I really want to do this. And I transferred to a different school. So I was going from a very hard science, from engineering program into a more liberal arts program. And so to graduate on time, they said, well, you can either go into chemistry or go into geology. And I took a chemistry class and a geology class. And in the geology class, you got to go on field trips and camping and have a rock hammer and drink beer. And I thought, this feels more in my lane. And then I said, well, I probably need to get a real job. I have a lot of family and family friends that were in academics. So I was kind of on that career path of, I think I'm going to go into academics. And I just thought, I don't know that that's the right thing for me. And I knew a few people who had left academia and gone into actually consulting. And so that's how I got into my career initially, was, through a recommendation and a entry-level geologist, but working in the environmental consulting space. So looking at remedial design, so a lot of soil and groundwater sampling, investigation, and then remediation design. So that's kind of that's where I started and spent a big chunk of my early career.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it, that even at that early stage, you sort of sensed what wasn't right for you. So the
Mhm.
academic route, because so many people are influenced by those around them
Yeah.
and think that's the route I have to take. So having that
Yeah.
independent thinking brain active at that age and saying, actually,
Yeah.
yeah, is it really right for me?
Exactly. And so I think I was a really curious, child, spent a lot of time in the outdoors, ended up, following that academic path, and then went into consulting. And once I got into consulting, again, in the technical space, so I was out in the field doing work on construction sites, like remedial construction sites, on doing soil sampling in the field. And I think I joke I was probably the most annoying entry level person, because I was always asking why. Why are we doing this? What's next? What's the purpose of this? How are we using this data? What, et cetera, et cetera. So I was always asking why. And I mean, I would say at that point in my career, I was very lucky to be surrounded by people, whether that was in the field or in the office, that were happy to answer those questions and really spend the time with me to allow me to be curious. I think I also very much early on recognized, I mean, I have a I mean, it certainly comes from my family, and those around me as a young person. I have a very strong work ethic, and I think it was also about, how do I help people, right? So yes, very curious, and then also, how can I help you? And so having that client-centric mindset early on, really helped a lot as well to position me. So people maybe would spend the time with me because there was value, right, in both directions. So I was really lucky to spend time with people that also invested in me in my early career. So was super curious. So moved from that technical space into more project management, program management. I loved engaging with our clients and, again, helping them solve problems. So then moved from that space of, solving a technical problem, to like, what's maybe that bigger business problem. And so spent a lot of time, project program management, and then moved into, I would say, client development, right? I loved working with our clients. It was really a career path that I was on for a long time. So, and I loved it. I love, again, you're solving different and new problems all of the time. So that was a great space for me. Again, I had an opportunity to take on a different kind of role within the organization, focusing on leading our technical teams. And I think that was the first time I took a role that was maybe outside of my comfort zone and to really understand a different part of our business. And that was, set me on a journey of, being at the leadership team, or with the
Mm.
leadership team, but thinking about a different part of our business and what that team really needed. And I learned a lot about my own leadership style, what worked, what didn't work, and how to be an advocate for people. I'm representing you at the table. What do you need to be successful? And being responsible for a group of people really, helps drive that. So I went from, technical career path to client development, then to a leadership team member thinking about our technical group, and then had the opportunity to take on leadership of our client development at that time in the United States in our environment business. So did that for a number of years and then led a P&L. So I led the whole team around our business in the US in the environment space for a number of years. So I did that. So I was really still in my own lane of geology to environment space. And then the company I was with, Arcadis, reorganized, and I had the opportunity to move from one vertical into another. And that really sent me on a slightly different journey, right? So I did go back to sales, but in our places or built environment space, right? So really looking at vertical construction. And so that sent me on a, slightly different career path. And then took me a minute to say, can I get my head around this and can I be as excited about buildings as I have been about the environment? And the thing that brought it together for me was really looking at what is impacting our world. When I think about sustainability and I think about climate crisis, the built environment has the biggest impact. More than 40% of carbon emissions are in the built environment. And so being able to take that, first 15 years of my career and then say, okay, how can I take that passion and enthusiasm and then apply it to a different part of our business was really exciting. So got to learn another part of the business. And then my experience having run a P&L made me a better salesperson as well, right? Because I understood that part of the business was also at a global level. So kind of bringing all of those things together. But I would say the thing that the common thread across all of it was always being super curious.
Yeah, brilliant. And thanks for sharing that. But I think what I'm hearing, is the not staying in, okay, you stayed in your lane, but
Yeah.
that lane seemed quite wide and varied.
Yeah.
And also the assumption that somebody who does geology is that sort of analytical,
Yeah.
quieter, introverted. It's
Yeah.
really nice to hear that evolution of
Yeah.
your career. But there's always an issue, isn't there, in construction and
Yep.
engineering around women in the
Yep.
workplace?
Yep.
Way back when you were a junior geologist.
I think number one, I would say I am so pleased to be working in an environment now that is so different from when I started in terms of what expectations are. And I think a lot of that comes from an expectation around health and safety and then continuing over the years to expand what we think about around health and safety and really getting to like the full scope of wellness and personal well-being, right? Physical and mental safety, right? So I think that has really helped contribute to the environment that we are working in now. Yeah, it wasn't always great. And it still is a challenge, right? In that space. So I think for me, there were, again, I was very lucky to be surrounded by some amazing mentors and then had some mental fortitude, I think, right around personal resilience and being able to make connections and build relationships with people that didn't always think the same way or talk the same way or work the same way. But yeah, there's certainly some uncomfortable, situations that happened early on in my career. And I'm happy to always talk about this, especially with, earlier career women and other minorities, like thinking about what does that look like now? And I just think the thing is the expectations that we set, right? None of that is okay. Like how people were treated early on in my career. And I love that most people don't have to experience that, right? That's not the expectation. But it was challenging. And I think it really, again, that personal resilience piece, it taught me to maybe ask different questions, to learn how to navigate and be able to find your safe spaces, but find the people that will be, willing to help you and work with you and find common ground with folks.
Mm, mm. You said that sometimes it still happens, not necessarily sexism, but you still have to draw on that resilience. What do you do when you're feeling under pressure today? Because you might have a circle of friends and a circle of
Yeah.
peers, but
Yeah.
how do you keep that balance today? Especially, you're relatively new in role, so there's obviously a lot of you've got grand ambitions. So how do you maintain that wellness for yourself?
Yeah, I think, a couple things I would probably speak to. One is, I mean, you mentioned it, that network and that circle of, whether that's peers in your current organization, whether that's in your industry or within your friend group, right? So I mean, I do think that is super, super critical. I don't know that I recognized how important that was early on in my career. That was like creating those networks of people, and I've been really lucky to engage in different kinds of networks over the years. But really finding those people that you can bounce ideas off, that you can have those conversations, having that set of trusted advisors is super critical, right? So that you can say, "Wait, am I the crazy person? What's going on here?" So that's really critical. The higher up you get in that organization, it can be a little bit lonely, and it's
Mm.
harder to ask those questions within your own organization. So whether that's having a coach, or an external peer group of other executives, to have those safe conversations is super, super critical. So I definitely rely on that, and friends that have been in the business for a long time and have scattered around. So it's really, those networks are really critical.
Yeah. And how do you make time for that? Because so often I hear people say, "No, I haven't. I'd like to do that, but actually I
Yeah.
haven't got time."
I mean, I think it's probably like any journey that you're on, it's about making, about prioritization. So I mean, I think people talk a lot about, uh maybe physical wellness, and you go, okay, if I want to work out, I need to put that meeting on and it has to be non-negotiable. I'm going to keep it. It's similar to this. You get out of it what you put into it, I think, right? So you've got to decide to prioritize. And I would say we all go through, seasons where you can prioritize those, where maybe delivery is more important than thinking 3 or 5 years, or there's a client meeting or a board meeting that comes up that you just can't, change. So
Mm.
and you do have to continually flex. I talk about this a lot, again, with early career people, and I feel happy that I get these questions from men and women, not just women. I used to get these questions a lot only from women, but I do feel like I get it from more, from a balanced, conversation. But I do have two boys. I have a 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. So I've gone, been a working parent, lived through that. Oh, or I am a working parent. So I think that piece is, how do you do it all? And I think when I was earlier in my career, I would be somewhat offended by that. And usually I would be on a panel or something and someone would ask that question. And I would say, why are you asking me? Why aren't you asking the five men sitting next to me? How did they do it all?
Yeah, yeah,
It is about balance, and it's about making decisions for yourself about what balance looks like, and also recognizing that it is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And so you're never going to get it right, that balance right every single day, but over week, a month, a year, did you find that balance, and can you set those priorities? I mean, there were times when my kids were young and early career where you just thought, I'm not doing anything well, right? Because you couldn't figure out how to prioritize. But it is like, some days you're going to be a great parent, some days you're going to be great at work, you're going to show up differently. And I would say the same, as your career develops and as your responsibilities change, it's, some days I have to show up for the client and this
Mm.
deliverable. Some days I can think about what's the strategy of the organization, or some days I can think about personally what's going on with my career trajectory. So it's finding that balance and thinking about it in the longer span, right? Rather than on a day-to-day basis.
yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because, I like how you put in the last part of prioritization was looking at your own career, because when I'm working with women in mid
Mhm.
to early career
Yeah.
construction industry, they're absolutely fantastic, really committed, but they find it difficult to think about how they can plan their own career. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's done to them rather than they do it for themselves. So it's great to hear that you've built that mental thinking into your psyche and day to day. But can I ask though, Kathleen, like, when you think about what you've had to compromise, if anything, through your career,
Mhm.
what would you say that compromise has been?
I think it's been different, again, over the course of my career. I think it's been different. What am I willing to compromise? And I think that's in anybody's life. What are you compromising to, if you have a hobby that you're really passionate about, or if you have, depending on what's going on in your personal life. So I think it's always a compromise. For me personally, I mean, I can say without a doubt, I compromised probably physical health and well-being early on in my career with when I was also having children, right? There's only so many hours in the day.
Mm.
I also compromised having a clean house.
I actively recommend compromising on that one.
Exactly. You have to pick and choose, like,
Mm.
which hills are you willing to die on, right? And I would not recommend that anyone compromise on their personal health, but, there's certain things you can say, "Okay, I'm gonna really focus on how I'm eating or sleeping versus maybe how many times I'm going to the gym at a certain point in your career," right? And so that's been something I've compromised. Also, what does time spent with friends and family look like? As like your friends and your work become pretty intermingle.
Mm.
And so it's also about making sure that you're taking time for fun. And one of the things that just keeps coming up for me is we spend so much of our time at work. It has to be with people that you like and it has to be fun, right? So how do you bring that in, that sense of play, that sense of into a very serious, business? How do
Mm.
you do that, right? I think that's something else that's very, very important is knowing what your own personal boundaries are. And I talk about that again with my team. It is very much about communication, right? So knowing what are the things that you can do and can't do, and then communicating them, and then we can all as a team figure out how to work around each other and work, to get the best out of the whole team. Not everybody has to do everything exactly the same way, right? We're better when we're a team and you bring all that different diversity into the mix. I
Mm.
love what I do, and I am happy to spend these many hours this time. Like it works for me. That I know that doesn't work for everybody, and I wouldn't tell anybody to work that way. But I'm going to be open about what works for me. I need you to be open about what works for you, and then we, figure out how to make it work for.
If you were starting a new job, you are starting a new job, what
Yeah.
would you recommend, the first 90 days to look like?
The number one thing is listen. And I will say, I think I'm a pretty good listener, right? It's been a big part of my career in terms of, if you're a client facing person, that's inherent in what you're doing is listening to your clients. So listening is the number one thing. And the thing that I keep telling myself, and I've been just, I feel wonderfully lucky to have another executive team member in the organization at Shawmut just keep continuing to remind me to be patient. So I would say listening and patience, especially for someone that, again, what got you here won't get you there, and wants to jump in and take action. You think you know the solution, but it really is about listening. So
Mm.
listening would be the number one thing I would say, and patience.
Um, you know, I'm really interested in, how does the construction sector support societal benefit? Obviously, providing homes, providing great schools, brilliant transport links, blah, blah. But in terms of like your commitment to supporting environmental quality and, reducing carbon emissions, what do you think you can do as Chief Growth Officer to support for societal benefit?
Yeah, I mean, so for me personally, that was, a part of the reason I decided to make a career change and move from Arcadis over to Shawmut, right? I'd been there for 22 years. It's an amazing organization. But one of the reasons was to be able to have an even bigger impact on the built environment, right? So with Shawmut, we are building those buildings that were designed, that Arcadis designs. And so when we look at how can we have that impact, how we construct those buildings, the materials that are used, that's where the biggest, that's where the biggest impact can be. So that ability to have an outsized influence there and bring that thinking into the construction company was pivotal for me. And I think it is, the other thing is that it really is around overall value. So decisions that we make in terms of how we design the materials we use and how we construct, it really is a better business outcome when you're using less, materials, when the building can be operated more efficiently, when you can renovate or retrofit an existing building, right? The most sustainable building is one that you don't have to build. So
Mm-hmm.
when you can think about how to use technology in a different ways. I was really had the benefit of working with Autodesk as another, extension, as another partner in looking at different technologies where you could see through walls, right? And start to think about how do we do renovation retrofit differently. So all of those elements, really, that's where the construction industry plays such a space. I think the other thing is, I mean, that's where the physical manifestation, right, of your communities are in the built environment.
Yeah.
So again, having that thought process in that space. And maybe the last thing I would say is it's really important. One thing that is amazing, and I would be remiss if I didn't say it, is that at Shawmut, 52% of our team is female. And I think that's an incredible statistic when you think about the construction industry. And the more our companies look like the communities that we operate in, the better outcomes that we'll have. And so
Yeah.
again, just thinking about how can I be a visible leader in that space. And when, young women look at where do they want to go with their skill sets, that they can look into organizations and see people, at the top level making decisions and driving those organizations, I think is really critical.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for talking to me today. I really enjoyed listening to you. If people were curious to keep in touch with you or get in touch with you, how might they do that?
Thanks, Barbara. I think the two easiest ways, one is you can certainly find me on LinkedIn under Kathleen Abbott. And then the other place would be at shawmut.com. And you look to our leadership team there, you can find me right at the top.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you ever so much for taking part.
Today's conversation sparked a thought, stirred something in you, or helped you see your purpose a little bit more clearly and with clarity, then take a moment to honour that. That's brilliant. Remember to like, share and subscribe so that more people can find stories that support them through pressure, change and the work of becoming who they're meant to be. I'm Barbara and you'll find my details in the show notes. I run Glee Coaching Company and I would love to hear about what resonated with you, what challenged you and where you are on your own journey. Until next time, keep leaning into your purpose, stay steady under pressure and take time to appreciate where you're at.